Hello everyone, welcome back to Easy Talks. So we are continuing with the revision class series. Today's topic is from module 6, that is the non-detailed part from the 20th century British literature. Without wasting much time, let's move on to today's topics. First is The Great Tradition by F.R. Leavis. So it is a book of literary criticism which was written by F.R. Leavis and published in 1948 by Shatto and Windus. In his work, Leavis names Jane Austen, George Eliot, Henry James and Joseph Conrad as a great English novelist. In all these eight, including Charles Dickens, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Herman Melville and Edgar Allan Poe, we have also the successors of Shakespeare. Within his argument, he adds D.H. Lawrence to be the pantheon of great novelists in English, though Leavis discusses Lawrence more in later works. Leavis disparaged Dickens except for his novel Hard Times as lacking the mature standards and interest found in the works of Henry James. There was a similar contrast on the aspect of using melodrama on the novels as compared to Joseph Conrad. In one statement on page 19, Leavis places Dickens among classical writers but not in the great tradition. That Dickens was a great genius and is permanently among the classics is certain. But the genius was that of a great entertainer, and he had for the most part no profounder responsibility as a creative artist than the description suggests. Leavis held great sway over literary criticism of English literature until his death in 1978. Other views have emerged since then in support of a great number of authors. The next is The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. It is a novella which was published in 1899, which talks about the sailor Charles Marlowe tells his listeners the story of his assignment as a steamer captain for a Belgian company in the African interior. The novel is widely regarded as a critique of European colonial rule in Africa, while also examining the theme of power dynamics and morality. Although Conrad does not name the river on which most of the narrative takes place, at the time of writing the Congo Free State, the location of the large and economically important Congo River was a private colony of Belgium's King Leopold II. Marlowe is given a text by Kurtz, an ivory trader working on a tradition station far up the river, who has gone native and is the object of Marlowe's expedition. Central to Conrad's work is the idea that there is little difference between civilized people and savages. Heart of Darkness implicitly comments on imperialism and racism. The novella's setting provides the framework for Marlowe's story of his fascination for the prolific ivory trader Kurtz. Conrad drew parallel between London, the great town on earth, and Africa as a place of darkness. Originally issued as a three-part serial story in Blackwood's magazine to celebrate the 1000th edition of the magazine, Heart of Darkness has been widely republished and translated in many languages. It provided the inspiration for Francis Ford Coppola's 1979 film Apocalypse Now. In 1998, the Modern Library ranked Heart of Darkness 67th of their list of 100 best novels in English of the 20th century. Next is a novel by Virginia Woolf, Mrs. Dalloway. So it was a novel published on 14 May 1925. It details a day in the life of Clarissa Dalloway, a fictional upper-class woman in post-First World War England. The working title of Mrs. Dalloway was The Hours. The novel began with two short stories, Mrs. Dalloway in Bond Street and The Unfinished, the Prime Minister. The book describes Clarissa's preparation for a party she will host in the evening and the ensuing party. With an interior perspective, the story travels forward and backward in time to construct an image of Clarissa's life and the interwar social structure. The novel addresses the nature of time in personal experience through multiple interwoven stories. In October 2005, Mrs. Dalloway was included on Time magazine's list of 100 best English language novels written since its first issue in 1923. Next, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. So, it is the first novel of Irish writer James Joyce. a culture roman written in modernistic style. It traces the religious and intellectual awakening of young Stephen Dedalus, Joyce's fictional alter ego, whose surname alludes to Daedalus, Greek mythology's consummate craftsman. Stephen questions and rebels against the Catholic and Irish conventions under which he has grown, culminating in his self-exile from Ireland to Europe. The work uses techniques that Joyce developed more fully in Ulysses, which was published in 1922, and Finnegans Wake, which was published in 1939. A Portrait began life in 1904 as Stephen Hero, a project 63-chapter autobiographical novel in a realistic style. After 25 chapters, Joyce abandoned Stephen Hero in 1907 and set to rework its theme and protagonist into a condensed 5-chapter novel, dispensing with strict realism and making extensive use of free, indirect speech that allows the reader to peer into Stephen's developing consciousness. American modernist poet Ezra Pound had the novel serialized in the English literary magazine The Egoist in 1940 and 1950, and published as a book in 1960 by B.W. Hsst of New York. The publication of A Portrait and the short story collection Dubliners, which was published in 1914, earned Joyce a place at the forefront of literary modernism. The next work is 1984 by George Orwell. It is a dystopian social science fiction novel, and it was published on 8 June 1949 by Secker and Warburg as Orwell's ninth and final book completed in his lifetime. Thematically, it centers on the consequences of totalitarianism, mass surveillance, and repressive regime of people and behavior with society. Orwell, as a democratic socialist, modeled the authoritarian state in the novel on Stalinistic Russia and Nazi Germany. More broadly, the novel examines the role of truth and facts within societies and the ways in which they can be manipulated. The story takes place in an imagined future in the year 1984, when much of the world is in perpetual war. Great Britain, now known as Airstrip 1, has become a province of the totalitarian superstate Oceania, which is led by Big Brother, a dictatorial leader supported by an intense cult of personality manufactured by the party's thought police. Through the Ministry of Truth, the party engages in omnipresent government surveillance, historical negationism, and constant propaganda to persecute individuality and independent thinking. The protagonist, Winston Smith, is a diligent, mid-level worker at the Ministry of Truth who secretly hates the party and dreams of rebellion. Smith keeps a forbidden diary. He begins a relation with a colleague, Julia, and they learn about a shadow resistance group called the Brotherhood. However, their contrast with the Brotherhood turns out to be a party agent, and Smith is arrested. He is subjected to months of psychological manipulation and torture by the Ministry of Love, and is released once he came to love Big Brother. 1984 has become a classic literary example of political and dystopian fiction. It also popularized the term Orwellian as an adjective, with many terms used in the novel entering common usage, including Big Brother, doublethink, thought police, thought crime, newspeak, 2 plus 2 is equal to 5. Parallels have been drawn between the novel's subject matter and real-life instances of totalitarianism, mass surveillance, and violation of freedom of expression, among other things. Orwell describes his book as a satire and a display of the perversions to which a centralized economy is liable, and while also stating he believed that something resembles it could arrive. Time included the novel on its list of 100 best English language novels from 1923 to 2005, and it was placed on the Modern Library's 100 best novels, reaching number 30 on the editor's list and number 6 on the reader's list. In 2003, it was listed at number 8 on the Big Red Survey by the BBC. The next is novel by Joan Fowles, The French Lieutenant Woman. The French Lieutenant Woman is a 1969 postmodern historical fiction. The plot explores the fraud relationship of gentleman and amateur naturalist Charles Smithson and Sarah Woodruff, the former governess and independent woman with whom he falls in love. The novel builds a Fowles authority in Victorian literature, both following and critiquing many of the conventions of period novels. The book was the author's third after The Collector and The Magus. American Library Magazine counted the novel among the notable books of 1969. Subsequent to its initial popularity, publishers produced numerous editions and translated the novel into many languages. Soon after the initial publication, the novel was also treated extensively by scholars. The novel remained popular, figuring in both public and academic conversations. In 2005, Time chose the book as one of the 100 best English novels since the magazine began publication in 1923. Part of the novel's reputation concerned its postmodern literary qualities with expression of metafiction, historiography, metahistory, Marxist criticism, and feminism. Stylistically and thematically, the novel has been described as historiographic metafiction. The contrast between the independent Sarah Woodruff and the more stereotypical male character often earns the novel attention for its treatment of gender issue. The novel also adapted into film of the same name in 1981 with script by the playwright Harold Pinter, which was directed by Carell Reese, starring Meryl Streep and Jeremy Irons. The film received considerable critical acclaim, including several BAFTA and Golden Globe awards. The next is The Night at the Circus by Angela Carter. So it was first published in 1984, and the winner of 1984 James Tate Black Memorial Prize for Fiction. The novel focuses on the life and exploits of Sophie Fivos, a woman who is, so she would have people believe, a Cockney virgin hatched from an egg laid by unknown parents and ready to develop fully fledged wings. At the time of the story, she has become a celebrated aerialist. She captivates the young journalist Jack Walser, who runs away with the circus and falls into a world that his journalistic exploits has not prepared him to encounter. Nights at the Circus incorporate multiple categories of fiction, including postmodernism, magic realism, and post-feminism. As in his previous works, Carter plays with many literary aspects and dissects the traditional fairy tale structure. In 1994, the novel was broadcast by BBC Radio 4 as a series of reading. It was read by Leslie Manville, abridged by Neville Teller, and directed by Neil Cargill. In 2006, it was adapted for the stage by Tom Morris and Emma Rice for the Knee-High Theatre Company. The play was performed at the Lyric Hammersmith in London and the Bristol Old Vic before touring. The next and the last work from this module is The Top Girls by Carol Churchill. Top Girls is a 1982 play. It centers on Marlene, a career-driven woman who is heavily invested in women's success in business. The play is set in the Britain of the early 1980s and examines the issue of what it means to be a successful woman, initially using historical characters to explore different aspects of women's social achievement. Top Girls were written in the background of Margaret Thatcher's election as Britain's first female prime minister and deals with concerns such as Thatcher's right-wing politics, a shift in 1980s Britain from a socialist mindset to more capitalistic one, and the feminine politics of the 1980s. The play was premiered at the Royal Court Theatre, London on 20th August 1982. It was directed by Max Stafford Clerk, the Royal Court's artistic director, who premiered several of Churchill's plays. So here comes the end of a module dealing with the non-detailed part from 20th century British literature. Thank you.